The neighbors would later say the couple looked like a fairy tale, young, beautiful, deeply in love. No one imagined that behind the pristine white walls of their Florida mansion, a chilling secret was festering. And no one could have predicted how violently it would all end when the truth came out. Welcome to this True Crime channel, your portal into the most chilling true crime cases, unsolved mysteries, and the darkest corners of criminal history. If you are new here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. In today's case, we dig deep into the facts, uncover shocking twists, and explore the theories that keep investigators and the world on edge. Stay back and enjoy. Sarah Whitmore had it all: beauty, charm, a thriving career, and a fortune left behind by her late father, billionaire land developer Henry Whitmore. After years of loneliness, she finally met Daniel Brooks, handsome, attentive, and so seamlessly perfect that even her closest friends were envious. From the moment they met at a charity gala in Miami, it was as if the universe itself had orchestrated their collision. Daniel swept her off her feet with grand gestures and whispered promises of forever. Within a year, they were married in a lavish ceremony under the Florida sun. Their life, it seemed, was nothing short of a dream. But dreams can quickly twist into nightmares. 6 months into the marriage, Sarah started noticing subtle oddities. Daniel grew secretive. He would vanish into late-night calls, lock his office doors, and maintain a meticulous journal that he guarded fiercely. At first, Sarah dismissed it. After all, love meant trust. But then came the letter. Buried deep in a forgotten box of Daniel's things, Sarah found an old, tattered envelope, addressed to "My son." The contents would shatter everything she knew. Inside, there were documents revealing that Daniel Brooks was not who he claimed to be. Daniel was Daniel Whitmore, her stepbrother. Henry Whitmore, before his death, had an illegitimate son. A son abandoned in bitterness. A son who had sworn revenge. Daniel had known all along. He had come into her life, not by fate but by design. His plan was to marry her, gain access to the Whitmore fortune, and take everything he believed was rightfully his. The perfect love story had been a perfect lie. Shock turned to rage. Rage turned to despair. And despair turned to something far darker. Sarah didn't confront Daniel immediately. Instead, she played her part, the doting wife, the oblivious princess, while inside a storm raged. She meticulously planned her next moves, not out of fear, but out of a searing need for justice. In a chilling twist, Sarah orchestrated a quiet evening. Candlelight, music, the pretense of love. Daniel had no idea he was walking into his own execution. When the night reached its crescendo, Sarah led Daniel to the balcony overlooking their sprawling estate. As he raised a glass in a mockery of love, Sarah calmly revealed what she knew. Witnesses later said they heard arguing, a sharp escalation from soft murmurs to furious shouts. But no one could have predicted the final sound, a body crashing against the cold, hard tiles below. When authorities arrived, they found Daniel's broken body sprawled beneath the balcony, a shattered wine glass beside him. Sarah was found in the bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, rocking back and forth, whispering, "He was never who he said he was." At first, the incident was ruled a suicide. Daniel's supposed depression, the pressures of wealth, the perfect public life, it all made a tragic kind of sense. But something didn't sit right with Detective Laura Mendez, the sharp-eyed lead investigator. The scratches on Daniel's arms, the missing chunk of the balcony railing, the subtle bruises on Sarah's wrists, all painted a picture far messier than a simple leap. And when they dug into Daniel's background, the lies unraveled spectacularly. Investigators uncovered fake identities, hidden trust documents, and private investigators hired by Daniel months before he ever met Sarah. It was clear, Daniel hadn't stumbled into Sarah's life. He had meticulously hunted her down. The tale of romance was a calculated scheme. And Sarah's act of grief began to look a lot more like an act of vengeance. The irony was unbearable. Henry Whitmore, in trying to bury his past sins, had unwittingly planted the seeds of his daughter's destruction. The son he abandoned became the husband who would betray her. But the final blow? Sarah wasn't just defending her fortune. As police later discovered, she had been weeks away from announcing her pregnancy. The child Daniel would have claimed as his own was part of the legacy he sought to steal. Justice had been served, but at an unimaginable cost. As Sarah sat in the cold, sterile interrogation room, Detective Mendez placed a small, blood-stained journal in front of her, Daniel's journal. It held the chilling blueprint of his entire plot, from seduction to ultimate takeover. "You weren't his only target," Mendez said coldly. "There's more you don't know." Sarah's eyes widened in horror. The nightmare was far from over. Sarah sat stiffly across the metal table in the sterile interrogation room, the weight of Daniel's blood-stained journal pressing into her soul. Detective Laura Mendez, sharp as broken glass, flipped open the worn leather cover with a clinical hand. Page after page revealed the grotesque truth. Daniel hadn't been acting alone. The entries outlined not just his personal vendetta against Sarah and her father, but a broader, sinister plan devised with shadowy partners, people who had stakes in Henry Whitmore's empire, people who still wanted what Sarah had. Names were mentioned. Meetings in dark corners of Miami. Cryptic references to Phase 2. Sarah's blood ran cold. Daniel had been the dagger, but someone else had been holding the handle. Days later, Sarah's mansion was ransacked. Files missing. Computers wiped clean. It was clear, whoever Daniel was working with wasn't finished. A quiet warning arrived next. A single white rose left on her car windshield, tied with a note. "You can't bury the past forever." Sarah realized then she wasn't mourning a dead husband anymore. She was preparing for a war she hadn't asked for, and she had to survive it. For the first time in months, Sarah Whitmore stopped grieving and started strategizing. She hired her own private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop named Marcus Dean, who knew the dirty side of Miami better than anyone. With Marcus digging into Daniel's partners, Sarah started piecing together a horrifying puzzle. Turns out, Henry Whitmore's fortune wasn't as clean as she thought. Behind the polished image of philanthropy and development were ties to blackmail, illegal land deals, and a secret will, one that split his empire between multiple illegitimate children no one publicly acknowledged. Sarah wasn't just a wealthy heiress. She was the last obstacle between ruthless enemies and billions of dollars. Marcus uncovered a name buried deep in the journal: Adriana Cross, Daniel's mother. Adriana had been Henry's former mistress, cast aside when Henry married Sarah's mother. Bitterness festered into hatred, and Adriana had poisoned Daniel's mind with dreams of revenge. But the most chilling discovery? Adriana was still alive. And she had been orchestrating everything, grooming Daniel, guiding him, and now targeting Sarah. Sarah realized Daniel's death hadn't ended Adriana's thirst for revenge. It had only made her more desperate. One night, as Sarah stood alone in the grand, echoing halls of her father's estate, she received a call. A woman's voice, cold, venomous, whispered, "You took my son. Now I'll take everything you have left." Click. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's hands trembled, but her heart hardened. She had been used, lied to, betrayed by blood and love, but she would not be a victim again. The story wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival. And this time, Sarah was ready to play dirty too. In seeking to destroy her enemies, Sarah began to mirror them, cold, calculating, unyielding. She started liquidating assets, moving money into offshore accounts, selling off pieces of the Whitmore empire before it could be stolen from her. She fired longtime staff, closed the charity foundations, and began preparing to leave Florida, for good. To the world, it looked like a grieving widow stepping away from her painful memories. In truth, it was a warrior dismantling her enemy's battlefield. Sarah wasn't running. She was clearing the board. But just when Sarah thought she had gained the upper hand, Marcus brought her shocking news. Adriana wasn't working alone either. There was another heir. Another illegitimate child, a half-sibling Sarah never knew about. And worse, they were closer to her than she could ever imagine. As Sarah stared out at the dark Florida skyline, a single terrifying thought echoed in her mind. Trust no one, because the real betrayal was still coming. The chilling revelation that Sarah had another half-sibling, someone alive, dangerous, and close, sent her spiraling. But who? Her friends? Her business partners? Someone inside her own home? Marcus Dean, ever the bloodhound, wasted no time. He cross-checked financial records, private communications, and birth certificates tied to Henry Whitmore's known affairs. After weeks of investigation, a name emerged: Olivia Cross, Sarah's personal assistant. The same Olivia who had held her hand at Daniel's funeral. The same Olivia who had whispered, "I'll always protect you." It wasn't a coincidence. It was a setup, from the very beginning. Sarah's stomach twisted in knots. Every memory she had with Olivia now seemed poisoned. Late nights working side by side. Private conversations where Sarah poured out her fears. Signing over minor power of attorney rights. Olivia had been positioning herself for months. Sarah realized she had willingly handed Olivia the keys to her kingdom. But why hadn't Olivia made her move already? Marcus had a theory: Olivia wasn't just after the fortune. She was after vengeance. Slow, psychological destruction. Killing Sarah quickly would be merciful. Olivia wanted her to suffer first. Sarah could have run, could have disappeared. But she was done being prey. Instead, she decided to bait the trap. She called a meeting with Olivia, casually, just the two of them, at the estate's private library, the same room where Henry Whitmore had signed his last will. Sarah hid a recorder under the antique desk. Cameras Marcus installed caught every angle. The air that evening was thick with silent hostility as Sarah pretended everything was normal. And then gently she dropped the bait. "I'm thinking of selling everything and moving out of the country." Olivia's eyes flickered. A flash of panic. And then rage. It was barely perceptible, but Sarah caught it. The mask had slipped, for just a second. Later that night, Sarah pretended to be asleep in her bedroom. Hidden cameras recorded Olivia creeping into Sarah's study, opening her safe and rifling through confidential documents. Sarah and Marcus watched from the surveillance room, every frame a dagger to her heart. Finally, Olivia pulled out a syringe, filled with a clear, deadly liquid. It was never just about the money. Olivia had planned to kill her. Slowly, painfully, and make it look like an overdose. Sarah called 911 and waited. The police burst into the mansion moments later, catching Olivia red-handed. The betrayal was finally laid bare for the world to see. Olivia screamed and fought as she was handcuffed, venom dripping from her words. "You were always the favorite. You were supposed to die, not Daniel." Olivia's arrest was a media frenzy. Reporters hounded Sarah, painting her both as a tragic victim and a ruthless survivor. But Sarah felt hollow inside. Her home was tainted. Her memories broken. She had survived, yes, but at what cost? The fortune her father left her was now a curse. Love had betrayed her. Blood had betrayed her. Even loyalty had been a lie. Justice had been served, but peace was still far, far away. As Sarah packed her bags to leave the mansion for good, Marcus handed her one last file. Inside were new documents, property transactions, offshore accounts, and a photo. A blurry image of another man. Someone connected to Henry Whitmore. Someone who had been quietly funding Daniel and Olivia behind the scenes. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the photo. Because the battle wasn't over yet. The kingpin, the one pulling all the strings, was still out there. And he was coming for her next. The file Marcus handed Sarah felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Inside were records of offshore bank accounts, wire transfers and deeds, all tracing back to one name. A name she hadn't heard in years. Caleb Whitmore, Henry Whitmore's estranged eldest son. The heir who had disappeared after a bitter family feud decades ago. The real puppet master behind the nightmare that had destroyed Sarah's life. Daniel and Olivia? Just pawns in Caleb's grand plan to seize everything. And now, with Daniel dead and Olivia behind bars, Caleb only had one obstacle left. Sarah. Sarah could have handed the evidence to the police immediately. But a cold fury burned inside her. She didn't want Caleb arrested. She wanted him exposed. Publicly. Permanently. Humiliatingly. She knew Caleb would make his move soon, likely in a way that would leave her dead with no one to question it. Marcus devised a risky plan. They would fake Sarah's death. A staged car crash, complete with fake forensic evidence and a death certificate, bought through shady channels. Sarah would die, disappear, and lure Caleb into revealing himself. It was dangerous. It was illegal. But it was the only way. And Sarah agreed without hesitation. The fake crash made headlines across Florida. Tragic loss. Heiress Sarah Whitmore killed in fiery car accident. Caleb, believing the road was finally clear, surfaced almost immediately. He filed emergency paperwork to claim Sarah's estate. Within days he moved into her mansion, laughing, drinking, celebrating his so-called victory. What he didn't know was that the house was wired. Every smug conversation, every admission of fraud, every whispered plan to sell off Sarah's legacy, it was all being recorded. Sarah watched it all unfold from a hidden safe house, her heart pounding with a strange mix of rage and satisfaction. Once they had enough evidence, Marcus and the police stormed the estate. Sarah stood at the front of the raid, alive and furious, her presence freezing Caleb in his tracks. His face turned sheet white. He stumbled back, muttering, "You're supposed to be dead." Sarah walked up to him, calm and unblinking, and said, "Monsters like you always forget one thing: survivors don't stay dead for long." The officers tackled Caleb to the ground, handcuffing him while Sarah stood over him, finally reclaiming her power. The betrayal, the murders, the manipulation, it all came crashing down on Caleb like an avalanche. Caleb was sentenced to life in prison for conspiracy, fraud, and aiding and abetting multiple homicides. The media devoured the scandal. Documentaries were filmed. Podcasts exploded with theories and commentary. Sarah, however, chose to step out of the spotlight. She sold the Whitmore mansion, donated most of her inheritance to victims of violent crimes, and moved to a quiet coastal town under a new name. Justice had been served. But healing? That would take much longer. Because while the villains were gone, the memories, the betrayals, still lingered like ghosts. Sarah's journey taught a brutal truth. Sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones sharpening the knife behind your back. But survival isn't about avoiding pain. It's about standing up after the wounds, choosing not to let the betrayal define you. And Sarah Whitmore, she chose to live. As Sarah unpacked boxes in her new seaside home, she found a small envelope tucked inside a book from her old library. It was a letter. The handwriting was Daniel's. The note simply read, "If you're reading this, it means I failed. But not everything I told you was a lie. Find the red door. Sarah's heart stopped. The story wasn't over yet. And somewhere, hidden beyond a red door, more secrets waited to be unearthed. The letter burned in Sarah's trembling hands. Find the red door, Daniel had written. After everything, the betrayal, the murders, the manipulation, why would Daniel leave her a clue? Had he been lying until the end? Or was there a deeper truth buried beneath the wreckage of their lives? Sarah knew she had no choice. She had to find that red door. Days turned into nights as Sarah scoured her old properties, storage units, secret compartments she had once thought meaningless. Nothing. Until one rainy afternoon, she remembered something strange about the old Whitmore estate. A hidden passage in the library her father once called the memory vault. Heart pounding, Sarah returned to the abandoned estate under police supervision. There, behind the rows of decaying books and torn portraits, she found it. A narrow iron door, once painted a faded red. Nearly invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. The key Daniel had hidden in the envelope fit perfectly. With a shaky hand, Sarah turned the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a room sealed off for decades. Inside, the room was filled with old documents, photos, and videotapes. Evidence carefully hidden away by her late father, Henry Whitmore. As Sarah and the investigators combed through the archives, a chilling reality unraveled. Caleb hadn't been the only schemer. Henry Whitmore, the man Sarah once idolized, had orchestrated it all from the beginning. He had faked Caleb's disappearance. He had manipulated Daniel into the family's orbit. He had conditioned Daniel from a young age to believe that revenge was his destiny. Daniel had been a victim too, groomed into becoming the pawn Henry needed to destroy any rival claims to the Whitmore fortune. Sarah's whole life had been a chess game she didn't even know she was playing. And in a cruel twist of irony, Henry had died just before seeing his plan explode. Daniel's final note wasn't a threat. It was an apology. He had realized too late that he truly loved Sarah. Not as a weapon. Not as a means to an end. But as the woman who had finally shown him real kindness in a world built on cruelty. Standing in that hidden room, Sarah finally allowed herself to weep, not just for Daniel but for the stolen childhoods, the poisoned love, the endless betrayals. They had all been victims. And yet she was the only one still standing. With the evidence recovered, Sarah turned it all over to the authorities. The Whitmore family's twisted legacy would finally be exposed to the world. And with it, Sarah's name would be cleared, not just legally but spiritually. She could finally close the door on the past, for good. The truth doesn't always set you free immediately. Sometimes it gets you first, forces you to rebuild yourself piece by broken piece. But when the smoke clears, the freedom you gain is a kind no one can ever steal again. Sarah Whitmore, the girl who had been lied to, betrayed, and hunted, was gone. In her place stood a woman forged in fire. Unbreakable. Unstoppable. Alive. Months later, Sarah stood on a cliffside, overlooking the endless blue of the Atlantic Ocean. The last of the Whitmore fortune had been donated to charities helping survivors of abuse and exploitation. She kept only a modest home and a small publishing business under a new name. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah whispered into the wind, "Thank you, Daniel. And goodbye." The past would always be a part of her, but it would no longer define her. And somewhere far away behind the rusted remains of a red door, the ghosts of betrayal finally laid themselves to rest.